Hello guys, and welcome to the second video in Java user login system video series. In the last series we created our frame which contained a username, password and a login button, and in this video we'll write action listener for our login button. So when we hit the login button, it should verify whether the user exists on our database or don't. So what we need to do is close our frame. So go to your frame method and we will write action listener for our button. So button name is b dot add action listener new action listener curly bracket. If you do not know how to add action listener, please watch my video on how to add action listener in Java, because I won't be explaining in detail here how to add action listener. So public void action performed, one method in our action listener class, and what I will write in this method will be performed when we will hit our login button. Okay, so what we need to do first is we create two string variables. So string user equals to, and this string variable will contain the data which we enter in our text field. So we have two text fields, one is t and one is t1. T contains the username and t1 contains the password. So string user equals to t dot get text dot trim. Why we're using this trim method? It will remove any spaces in our username. Okay, so string user equals to t dot get text dot trim. So t is the text field where we will enter our username. What does get text method do is get the text from this text field and assign it to the string variable user. So same we will do over with password. So string pass is equal to t1. T1 is the text field where we will be entering our password. T1 dot get text dot trim. Okay, so now we get our username and password and save them in our string variable user and pass. So what we need next to do is write this whole code in try and catch block, because we will be writing SQL statements. Catch exception ex. Okay, so after we declare two string variables which contain username and password, we need to create another string variable which will contain our SQL statement, because we will need to write a SQL query which will get the data from our database. So string SQL, and in double quotation marks we will write SQL query. So pay attention here, how to write SQL query is a little bit complicated. So select user pass from table 2. So it will select user and pass. User and pass are two fields in my table from table 2, and my table name is table 2. Okay, where, then we will write where clause. It will check where user equals to, then after equals to type single quotation marks. Okay, and single quotation marks and double quotation marks, and hit plus and write user. So why we write this user? This user is the text. This user is the text field on our frame. So it will check if the username equals to the user which we entered on our frame. Okay, so again plus, then double quotation marks and single quotation marks, and then we will write pass equals to, and then we will check password equals to, then we will write again single quotation marks and double quotation marks, and plus pass, and then we hit plus, and then we close double quotation marks and single quotation marks and again double quotation marks. Okay, So be careful, write exactly as I wrote here, otherwise it will give you an error message. So we get the fields user and password from our table 1, and then where user equal to the user which we entered on our frame, and password is equal to password which we entered on our frame. Okay, so we created a SQL query. Now what we need to do is we need to execute this SQL query. In the first tutorial we created a statement variable, okay, and a result set variable. We will be using those two variables here. So result set variable was rs equals to, then we will use statement variable to execute our query. So st is our statement variable, st dot execute query, and as argument we will give the string variable SQL which contains our SQL query. Now we created our SQL query and we executing our SQL query here and assigning to rs. So rs is a result set variable which is holding all the record after this query has been executed. So after we enter username and password, it will check whether this username and password exist and return those rows. So now we will create an integer variable count which will count how many rows have been returned by our query. So create an integer variable int count and set equal to 0. Okay, now we'll create a while loop. While rs dot next, while there are record in our result set, okay, and then opening curly bracket and closing curly bracket. While there are records in our result set, we will increase our count variable by 1 each time. So if there is 1 row, it will give us 1. If there is 0 row, it will give us 0. If there are more than 1 rows returned by this query, then it will contain more than 1. So each time our count variable will increase depending on how many rows have been returned by this query. Now if there are no rows returned, that means user does not exist in the database. If the count is equal to 1, that means 1 row is returned, that means user exists in the database. So we will write if statements here. If count equals to 1, if count equals to 1, that means user exists on the database. So we will display a message j option pane dot show message dialog. So message dialog takes two arguments, first null and second the message you want to display. The message you want to display is user found, access granted. Okay, this message will be displayed when the user exists in the database. Then if user does not exist on the database, else if count is greater than equal to 1, if there are duplicate records, if the same user exists twice on the database, then we do not want to give access to our any duplicate user. So we will display a message j option pane dot show message dialog, first argument null and second argument the message you want to be displayed. So I will say duplicate user access denied. Okay, duplicate user access denied. So okay, if our result set returns more than one record greater than 1, that means same user exists twice in our database. So we do not want to give access to user which are duplicated. And last one, else we will say j option pane dot show message dialog, first argument null, second argument we will say user does not exist, user not found. So if count is equal to 1, that means user exists, and it only exists once in our database, so we will grant the access. And if count is greater than 1, that means the same user exists twice in our database, so this is a duplicate user. We do not want to give access to duplicate users to our system. And else, that means no user does not exist in our database. So let's run it and test it if it is working. So let's run it. So here's our frame with username and password. We'll leave it blank, and when we hit login button, nothing happens. I think there is a mistake, so let me check what is wrong. I'll pause the video and come back. Alright guys, so I figured out there was a little mistake here in the SQL query. That's the reason why it was not working. So the mistake was here. I did not write and. So make sure that you write exactly the way I wrote it now. Select user pass from table 2 where user equal to user, this is the text field, and pass equal to pass. So make sure you write exactly the way I wrote it so you don't have any errors. So now if you run it, it should work. So here's our frame. So when we don't enter anything and press login, it gives us a message user not found because we're not entering anything. So if we enter now Steve 123, remember in the first tutorial when we created our database we entered Steve twice. So because why we enter Steve twice in our database? Because we don't want to give access to any user who is registered twice on our database. So when we enter Steve and press login, it says duplicate user access denied. And let's try with Simon. Simon was entered once in database, so it should work. Simon 123, press login, user found, access granted. So instead of I'm only displaying messages here, as you see, when count is equal to 1, I'm only displaying message user found, access granted. So instead of just displaying message, you can open a new frame, or you can give access. You can give access to the user to the form where you want user to carry out some operations or anything. So that's it for this tutorial series. So now I hope you know how to create a user login system and how to connect it to the database and how to verify if the user exists on the database or no. And if you have any problem regarding these tutorials, please do send me an email. I will help you. Thanks for watching. Please rate, comment and subscribe, and see you in the next tutorial.